have to get all these things straightened out for the new mayor. And I'll, now let me see, did I say, oh yes, the flowers, that's it. I've got a beautiful new bouquet here. Oh.
Hello, Betty.
Oh, hello, Your Honor. Good luck to you.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going off now.
All set to work.
Oh, no, you don't. You can't get away with that stuff.
What is it? What is that?
Autos too fast and trolleys too slow. Fix them up or out you go.
Our horses eat nothing and we eat hay. You better do something if you want to stay. Oh, here, goodness. What now? What now?
No benches in the park and too many lights. Nowhere to spark. We want our rights.
There's not enough bathing girls on the beach. Do something about that or we'll impeach.
Oh, dear. Oh, goodness.
Let's get out of here.
Well, trouble in the air, huh?
Well, Grandpa, what are you going to do about it? How about your thinking cap?
Well, you got something there, Betty. Guess I will. Hang on. Ah!
You got it?
Oh, no. Hooray! I've got it! Here's the Grampy.
All right. My house. Hooray for Grampy!
folks. When you goes to the polls today, a vote for Popeye means free ice cream for all the kiddies.
All right, men, step right over here and get your free cigars.
And what we need is bigger elephants in all our zoos. Oh, my gosh.
Now, just remember your old pal Bluto at the polls today, fellers. And there's an extra cigar for each and every vote you give me. Yes, sir.
And furthermore, I promises 2 cans of spinach for every pot. Here's me past record, folks, which speaks for itself.
You double-crosser. Steal my voters, will you? That winning vote. Guess I'll do over the White House in canary with green trim.
Get off the road, son. You're blocking traffic.
My chores.
Miss Oil, I'd like you to vote for me for president.
If you want a good-looking guy in the White House, vote for me, babe.
I can't go to the polls till I get the wood all chopped for the winter.
No sooner said than chopped, darling.
That vote is mine.
Votes for me?
Well, the field still needs plowing.
Okay, Olive. All done. Now to the polls.
Oh, I almost forgot. That hay must be put in the hayloft.
Shall we goes to the polls?
Popeye, I'm casting my vote for you.
Let's go, Toots. You're voting for me.
You, I'm not voting for.
Oh, yes, you are.
BDE Music Group presents Mississippi Votes. 5 weeks. The future and I see it clear. If you take a look around, you can see it's near. Black. Up to us.
Yeah, this may be the realest thing I ever wrote. The biggest effort of me trying to give my people hope. I've been talking, now I'm trying out a new approach. I'm just a vessel, credit go to Mississippi Votes. Let me show you where we count the most. If I can, let me show you what we got at stake. Pay attention, listen good, ain't no time to break. It's elections every single year here in our state. And with that I say time is of the essence. If we trying to see a change, then it's time for the lessons. Time out for just following trends and not knowing we influence the wind. Again and again we lack knowledge and importance of presence and expect that things just gon' change. Instead we gon' educate the youth on how to play the game. In 10 years it won't be the same. Cause we are the future and I see it clear. If you take a look around, you can see it's near. I know it's new to some, but look, it ain't no need to fear. It always come a time to learn, and that time is here. The future and it need me. Built for it so we make it look easy. On the front line, more is a plus, and they say the state need to change. It's up to us. A campaign led by POC. College students and volunteers gon' get us free. Facing charges from groups you can't believe. Getting people in circuit courts can intervene. Yeah. All because we knew who we were looking for. Did research before the time came to vote. We breaking records down here, oh you didn't know? Largest youth engagement since 1964. Include, engage, collaboration. Empowering our people with our innovation. Antique is what it is, they testing our patience. We need apps instead of driving to the voting stations. Get out the vote for the community you wanna see. Be the voice for the candidate you wanna be. No longer looking at our parents for the change. Now I'm looking in the mirror cause the answers start with you and me. Yeah, the future and I see it clear. If you take a look around, you can see it's near. I know it's new to some, but look, it ain't no need to fear. It always come a time to learn and that time is here. The future and it need me. Built for it so we make it look easy. On the front line, more is a plus, and they say the state need to change. It's up to us. And I say we are the future because in a couple years, the youth only know the work that we did. It's up to us to stress the importance of every election cycle. It's up to us to educate and inform the youth about the entire process. From ranked choice ballots to local government matters. It's up to us.
I'm John Winnett with Oxford to the Ballot Box. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome you to tonight's screening in Oxford Square of Voting Matters. This event is co-hosted by the Yoknapatawpha Arts Council and Oxford Film Festival. Tonight's screening includes videos by and with Mississippians speaking about voting and issues of importance, along with a Voters Forever video and a featured talk by University of Mississippi political science professor Dr. Marvin King Jr. Oxford to the Ballot Box is a community engagement project focusing on the 2020 presidential elections. Our project's goal is to encourage thoughtful civic discussion about the election and democracy. On behalf of the project, we want to thank everyone who's participated and all of you in attendance in the square and online. We'll have some final notes and thank yous, but for now, we invite you to enjoy the show.
So it's important to read your newspaper, pay attention to how you're getting information, educate yourself on local issues, pay attention to who you're putting in office, and exercise your right to vote. If you don't, things can be taken away from you, rights that our four people have fought, protested, bled, and died for. That can be taken away in the blink of an eye. And it's your responsibility to be engaged and participate. And the best way that you can do that is to exercise your right to vote. Go to the polls and cast your vote. Everybody gets that chance now, and you need to take it.
Voting is important to me because I know that the people in office affect my life every day. They affect public policy, including healthcare, education, and so much more. I want people in office who care about those issues and who will work hard to create a more equitable society.
Voting is important because everyone deserves the right to have a voice regardless of any other factor, and because everyone deserves to be able to enact change they want to see in the world around them.
Voting is important to me because it allows me to serve my community. It allows me to serve my community in a way in which I can vote for legislation that I feel best supports my community, and also vote for those who I feel represent my community in the best way. Also, as an African American woman who has grown up in the South, I recognize that there are those before me who were also African American, and they wanted to exercise their right to vote, but they were not able to, either due to acts of intimidation or discriminatory tactics that prevented them from voting. And so that is also why I take advantage of my right to vote.
In today's polarized political climate, it is more important than ever to participate in the voting process. As a social worker, it is not only our civil duty to vote, but it is also a way to make an impact on who is elected into our country's most powerful positions.
I choose to vote because I believe that every vote matters, and the people that I choose to vote into leadership positions, I want them to care about not only the policies, but the people that the policies affect.
Well, my birthday is August 4th, and I remember turning 18 August 4th and being actually in Montgomery, Alabama. I actually have a picture of my very first time voting. And at that time, I took a picture with now Supervisor James Burge for my very first time voting. And I was very excited to leave Montgomery, Alabama, and come back to Como, Mississippi, where I was registered. I wanted to physically come back home and be in Como and actually vote. And I remember the excitement of actually going to Como Library there in Como, Mississippi, and getting the opportunity to cast my vote for the very first time. And I will say this, that experience was amazing. And I thank Donna K. Taylor for taking the picture. She was working with a small newspaper, Southern Reporter at that time, locally, and she took my picture for the paper. And I still have that picture till this day, and I'm able to share it. And I've shared it on social media as well to encourage individuals to make it eventful. For those of you all that are voting for the very first time, I'm so elated that you're exercising your right, and that you're taking this as an opportunity to be effective and to be socially engaged. So thank you so much for that question, because that's something that I cherish so much.
As the 2020 presidential election is coming closer, I would like to ask you a few questions. What is important to you? What do you value? If you were to die today, what legacy would you want to leave for others? What defines you? What makes you, you? Freely, I'll admit that these are hard questions to answer, but I do find that they are important. Whether you are poor, rich, black, white, you were born in this country, or you weren't. As American citizens, we have been given the amazing opportunity, an opportunity to elect a leader who will help us through the next 4 years of the United States of America. Honestly, we all know that both Donald Trump and Joe Biden are human beings, flawed as we all are. But your vote isn't voting for everything they believe in. Your vote is voting for someone you think will value more of what you believe than go against it. What legacy do you want to leave? During a time in which America has experienced a global pandemic, we have seen the positive effects of when Americans join together for something greater and more significant than themselves. We have seen when Americans are able to step back and realize the importance of their lives and the lives of others. America is more than just a nation. It is your nation. It is your home. And if you want to protect your values and make sure that your needs as an American citizen is met, you are able to accomplish that through your voting. Through your voting in the 2020 presidential election, you will determine who leads you and our nation for the next 4 years. If we want America to prosper, it is our job to choose someone who we think will help America do so rather than crumble. So please, do your diligence as an American citizen and vote in the 2020 presidential election. Please do your part to make sure that America is prosperous in the next 4 years and in its future.
Yo, Mississippi, my name is Sakina Butts and I'm the Democracy in Action Fellow with MS Votes. I'm the Democracy in Action Fellow for the gorgeous Delta State University campus, and my first experience with voting was in the 2016 presidential election. I was a very young voter. I voted like a lot of college students or a lot of like newly graduated high schoolers do who aren't really into politics. I voted with my family's party. Now, since I'm nonpartisan with MS Votes, I would keep like my party selection to myself because that's private. But now growing up, growing into the MS Votes process, growing into learning about the political process overall, I've come to understand that everything from my college tuition to my mother's health care to my little cousin's education is ran through our government, funded through our government, and a big way that we as people make sure that our government gives our communities what we need is that we turn out to vote. We let them know that we have political power. This same system that, I'll be honest with you, in 1964 was oppressive to people of our skin color is now a tool that we have to use to better our communities still in this present age. And following the death of Ahmaud Arbery, following the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, we're now seeing that the only way that we're going to be able to get the laws that we need to prosecute people, even the bad apples in the police, is by voting. And so I'm saying this, regardless of like who you are, regardless of like where you are. To me personally, I think it's important to vote because the things that we care about, the things that are closest to us, the things that are home, our families, our children, all of that, they will grow up in this society in which we live. They will grow up in the Mississippi that we are making today. We are building the Mississippi of the future that we want to see. And so it's important to me to vote because that's a power that we have. That's a voice that we have. And if you're not gonna use it, then bruh, what are you doing? If we say we love each other, if we say we want to do better, then believe that by any means necessary. Voting is a means. So by any means necessary, you need to turn out and vote, Mississippi.
Hello, fellow students. Election day is coming up and we need all hands on deck. By placing your name on a ballot, you will be impacting this nation of America. Your vote matters, and I urge you to exercise your right. But why should you vote? Well, we're single-handedly allowing older generations to make decisions on our behalf. By not voting, you are not putting your opinion into the conversation. We are the future. Our voices may often seem to be insignificant, but that is not true. Our voices are imperative, and we need to exercise our right. According to a study done by Tufts University, only 48.3% of college students voted in the 2016 election. Now, although this is a 3% increase from the 2012 election, we're going to need a lot more than 3% with this upcoming election. Voting is a right, a privilege to shape the future to your liking. Election Day is November 3rd, and we need you to take a stand and vote. Go to vote.gov and register to vote and let your voice be heard. As political scientist Larry Sabato states, every election is determined by the people who show up. Will you show up? The choice is yours.
Hi, I'm Jillian Maxwell, and I'm a freshman here at Ole Miss. My reason for voting is because women have worked so hard in my past to give me the right to vote. I might as well use it to share my beliefs in politics.
My name's Annie, and I am from Dallas, Texas, and I am actually 21 right now. So the last presidential election I was only 17. So this upcoming November is going to be my first time voting in any presidential election, and I am kind of nervous about it because I obviously live in Oxford, Mississippi, and I go to school here, but I am registered to vote in Texas. And so I'm really not sure like how that's going to work. So I do need to figure that out so I can do my mail-in ballot.
Every teacher and every student now has to consider, what would I do if I hear those pop, pop, pop sounds and a siren goes off or an announcement goes, shelter in place, lockdown, lockdown.
Nobody should really have to think about where they would go, what they're going to do in a classroom if a school shooting were to happen. And having a young sister thinking about how this might be the new norm is just heartbreaking.
There are issues that matter to their generation. And if their generation doesn't speak up, those issues are going to get ignored.
I've always been really interested in diversity and inclusivity, a lot to do with LGBT inclusivity and women's rights.
A really big issue for me as of this moment would be the juvenile system as a whole. Rehabilitation over incarceration, something I strongly believe in, and just being able to have that chance to bring my voice out.
Really, I want to vote on like immigration issues because I actually have family that are immigrants and they're not doing anything wrong. They're just trying to find work and trying to make a better life for their families.
A really important issue for me personally would be healthcare because I have members of my own family who have been affected by cancer and all of the medical bills that surround that.
There are a lot of things that I try to speak up about and try to make an influence in. I'm a very patriotic person, and I feel like that's our duty as voters, is to uphold the Constitution.
We're polluting way too much. Global climate change, the oceans, sea levels are rising, the amount of fossil fuels emissions we put up into the atmosphere. I would like to see someone elected who realizes the threat that these environmental issues impose on all of us.
A really important issue I wish to vote on is how much the government has really played a role in each of our lives. So my mom is a single parent. She has been for 20 plus years. We really didn't have anyone to rely on, so we really had to rely on the government to help support us.
With the recent election, I feel it's brought a lot of racism into the world and now into the school because a lot of people view each other differently. A lot of people say a lot of derogatory things. I don't know if there's a particular solution because you can't change everyone's opinion, but I feel like it's important that we all respect each other.
Voting is a lot more important to do and has more of an effect than you think it does. And as a woman, especially as being a person of color, it makes me want to vote even more.
Once we're 18, we're able to vote, and that's one of the first things that's huge in our lives once we're an adult.
When they get into class with other people with an organization like the League of Women Voters, they get this sense of, oh, this is the real deal, and I should pay attention and I should register to vote.
The League of Women Voters is going into high schools and talking to the students about the importance of voting, the history of voting rights, and why one vote really matters. Our mission is to protect the right to vote and encourage civic engagement. And voting is the purest form of civic engagement. 40% of 18 to 19-year-olds are registered to vote, and of that, only 3/4 actually vote. So what does that tell you about who's making the decisions in our country? Think about that when you think about, do I really need to show up and vote?
Students in high school have no idea what voting is really like. It helps inform them on just how important voting really is. And for me, I'm really excited to vote.
We need to get the youth of America more involved in our voting process. The important thing for our generation to do is to kind of bridge the divide between citizens within the US.
We're in very distressing times right now. I feel like today in the political climate, we can't talk to people we disagree with. We've kind of gone into our corners, and so by starting the conversation and telling people, this is your civic duty, you need to vote, I think people are going to get more engaged in the political world and be able to branch out a little bit.
When the League of Women Voters come in to register students to vote, to see the students get excited about voting is extremely fulfilling for me, because I feel like maybe I can help the students understand that each election is historic. Each election is important in its own way.
There's no reason why we shouldn't have 100% of 18 to 19-year-olds who are eligible to vote registered to vote.
When you reach a certain age group young and you get them started early, I think they're going to keep it for the rest of their lifetime. I think a lot of people get stuck in the excuse that their vote's not going to matter. But if all those people that said their vote is not going to matter actually voted, the election may change.
I think a lot of people have the mentality that it's a single vote, like it won't make a difference, but when that one person turns into another, it adds up into 1,000 people that just think their vote doesn't matter, but it really does.
Empowerment is always what I am hoping for my students. I want them to hear from as many people as possible, to get out and vote, and to use your power, to use your voice, and to affect change.
I think my one vote is important because I will feel like I tried to make a difference.
A lot of these things affect us. Like, just because you don't vote doesn't mean it won't affect you.
We should take advantage of our opportunities and use it, because it really does matter, because it's our future that we're voting for anyways.
I hear a lot of my peers talking about how they're really upset with the politics right now, but the only way to get your voice heard is to go out and vote for what you believe in.
It's one of the most influential things you can do right now. This is how you make your mark.
If you really want to see a change,
you need to get out and vote.
Well, my name is Ruth Adam Ball. I am from Oxford. I've lived here most of my life. As far as my political activism goes, at present, I'm serving as Vice Chair of the Lafayette County Democratic Executive Committee. I'm also president of my local chapter of the NAACP. One of the things with me is about social justice and how we should be a group of people that believes in the rights of every individual. I may not always agree with everyone's opinions. In fact, there's a lot of times I don't agree with some people's opinions, especially in this state. However, I do believe everybody has the right to their own opinion, because after all, it is your opinion and you're the owner of that. I believe that everybody should have the right to vote and that there should not be any obstacles in the way of voting. We should not have voter suppression at all, because our vote is our voice.
Hi, this is Wayne Andrews with the Yoknapatawpha Arts Council, and I wanted to share my voting story. I wish I could say I have voted in every election since I was eligible, but when I was 18, I was away at college, and I didn't take the time to go back home and vote. And in our hometown elections, there was a candidate running for first selectman, which I knew the person, and first selectman is our mayor of the town I grew up in. So I knew this person. I thought they were a terrible candidate. I had known them for years and growing up in the town, and did not think this person would make a good candidate. But I got caught up with school. I didn't drive back home or make arrangements to vote, and he won by one vote. So it definitely taught me the lesson that every vote matters. It is important to vote. That voting does make a difference. So that is my voting story.
Greetings. My name is Marvin King. I'm an associate professor of political science and African American studies at the University of Mississippi. I am honored to be included in this program. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address the Lafayette Oxford University community in a forum beyond the classroom. The timing is critical, the topic is timely, and the stakes are paramount. I would like to thank Dr. John Winnett, Director, Oxford to the Ballot Box. Also, thank you to Alan Spohr and board members Eric Crystal, Christopher Rossi, and Dr. Sue-Ann Skipworth. Let us start with a basic question and drill down to find the answers. What are the issues and stakes of this election? In other words, why do we all need to vote in 2020? The issues are many, so let us briefly address them. Even though, outside of a few critical issues, I would not say this is an issues election. Instead, this is a what are American values kind of election. The economy and healthcare, of course. Climate change is high on the list. Deregulation is very important to a subset of voters, and definitely one area where President Trump delivered on his campaign promises. The federal judiciary is another area where Trump delivered for his supporters. As a result, there is no doubt that Trump's legacy will live on whether or not he is a one-term president. The next two items are technically issues, but in reality these speak to core American values. First is the coronavirus pandemic and the government's response. Albert Marin wrote, "Throughout the pandemic, the nation lacked a uniform policy about gathering places, and there was no central authority with the power to make and enforce rules that everyone had to obey. Each community acted on its own, doing as its elected officials thought best." Sound right? Well, those words were actually written to describe the influenza pandemic from 100 years ago, but it could just as well describe 2020. Yes, the pandemic is strictly speaking a public health issue, But more broadly, it gets to our attitudes toward government and freedom and liberty and science and rule of law, and even our attitudes toward our neighbors, our fellow travelers, even our families. Let's talk about masks. Who would have thought that masks might be the defining issue of 2020? I promise you that until this spring, no public opinion polls used by political scientists would have asked respondents what they thought of required mask use in public spaces. But yes, masks have become a lightning rod issue, encapsulating individual attitudes toward liberty, freedom, support for Trump, and just general quarantine fatigue. Yet the idea of masks really isn't new, in the sense that we are already told to wear seatbelts and life jackets and helmets. In each of those instances, groups of Americans stood up to say, "Don't trample on my liberty. I have the right to not do such and such." So we have seen this before, which is why I do not believe the mask issue is really about a piece of cloth. There is something deeper going on. America has reached such high levels of partisanship that really we are talking about negative partisanship. This is when your desire to see the other side lose is a more powerful motivator than seeing your own side win. Wearing a mask, for most who do so, it is an implicit acceptance of science and a show of concern and respect for our neighbors, our fellow travelers, and our families. It is a recognition, not necessarily an endorsement, but a recognition that the only way for us all to be free of this scourge is that we must work together and put aside partisan differences. Sure, wearing a mask might get uncomfortable when worn for a long time, but Americans wore masks during the pandemic from 100 years ago. As a result, to not wear a mask today for many, but not all, sends a different signal of prioritizing individual liberty and freedom, and perhaps sending a message that science should not and need not be the criteria by how which we organize society. There is a lot there we could unpack, and you can bet future historians, economists, political scientists, public health researchers, and cultural anthropologists will all ask a lot more mask-based questions in future public opinion polling. For you, voting in 2020 can be your chance to retrospectively grade the government's response to the pandemic. Let me put the second issue in context. Protests in the streets, with activists calling for a racial reckoning, a virus that led to the deaths of at least 100,000 Americans, a presidential candidate proclaiming the need for law and order amid appeals to the silent majority. This, of course, is 1968 that I'm talking about. America has once again entered another edition of our periodic navel-gazing regarding racial relations. Will this time be different? Time will tell. The parallels with 1968 are fascinating, but here is what interests me. The baby boomer generation was starting to vote for the first time in 1968. I want to see what direction our youngest voters want to take the country. What path do they want for America? Which issues matter most to them? But let's focus on the more difficult part of my question. What are the stakes of this election? This is more difficult because it goes beyond policy and speaks to the heart of common American political values regarding how we want to define America. What do we want America's standing in the world to be? What do you want it to be? And how do we achieve the vision you want? How do we achieve the best version of America? Your vote determines how America confronts the future. This question of American values plays itself out in several ways. Black Lives Matter and the protests over George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Jacob Blake are strictly speaking about police brutality. But much more broadly, Black Lives Matter is forcing a reckoning with America's original sin. Unpunished brutality aimed at African Americans is the child of America's original sin. If the names Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, Philander Castile, Amadou Diallo, and countless others mean anything to you, then your vote determines whether or how we grapple with these issues, or whether we continue pushing our problems onto the next generation. I would like to borrow an analogy from historian Isabel Wilkerson. In her latest work, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents, Wilkerson compares America to a beautiful old home that upon closer inspection has cracks in the foundation, a leaky roof, warped floorboards. You may not have created the problems plaguing your home, but once you own it, it is your responsibility to make the necessary repairs. For too long, for too many generations, America has been content to pass the repairs on to the next generation. I believe the George Floyd protests are a reckoning, a recognition that the bill has come due and it is now time to repair America's foundation. You are voting in this election and future elections to determine the type of democracy we have. The pandemic and America's racial chasm belie something politically rotten beneath the surface. America's political institutions are no longer the envy of the world. And the reality is that this is a long time in the making. This is not the result of one person or one party, but rather the reality is that the body politic needs a makeover. We have institutional liabilities. What are these liabilities? One example, for instance, is that current, in most states, legislators get to pick their voters, not the other way around. Once upon a time, there were moderates in Congress, lots of them. But as map-making tools became more sophisticated, legislators learned to identify voters at the neighborhood block level whose support was a known commodity. Similarly, they could excise opposition voters out of their district. Technological advances in gerrymandering make it easy to draw districts that lean strongly and predictably for one party. In these situations, candidates are incentivized to campaign and govern away from the middle because it is strong partisans most likely to turn out in the party primary. And given that legislative districts have a numerical preponderance favoring one party over another, general election results become fairly predictable. Because generally the most committed partisans show up in party primaries. The net result is many elected officials do not feel a gravitational pull to the ideological center. They believe, rightly so, that bipartisanship will only be rewarded with a primary opponent either to the left or the right of the incumbent, depending on the party. This is because partisan voters on both sides want a partisan to represent them, not a moderate. Maybe the country is center-left, maybe it is center-right, but in reality, it is pretty close to the center. Yet too many legislators represent only the nihilists, conspiracy theorists, partisans, cranks, and extremists, leaving millions frustrated, disillusioned, and estranged from the political process. And this is why we are voting in 2020. The reality is, Americans really do not like policy that strays too far from the middle. Not all at once, certainly. Yet we increasingly marginalize and disown moderates for the audacity of trying to reach compromise. I would think the framers would be very disappointed in us. I teach the flaws of the Constitution, but I also recognize its inherent beauty, which is that it is a document born of compromise. So in her heart, America is a nation of compromise, and I believe we have forgotten that. Therefore, your vote in 2020 is for whether or not the value of compromise has any value or meaning in the future of American politics. I've always loved learning the stories of the great politicians from our past. In fact, history books refer to them as not just politicians or congresspersons or senators, but as a statesman. There's a certain gravitas with that phrase. A statesman sees beyond the horizon and can marshal public support for the long-term common good. I am no Pollyanna. A lot of these statesmen, quite frankly, have flaws to a modern audience. I recognize that. But what I found admirable about them was their ability to get their followers to think about future generations. A statesman can bring ideological opposites to break bread together and solve seemingly intractable problems with well-crafted persuasion without relying on the slings and arrows of ill-tempered ad hominem attacks. Where are our statesmen today? Does gerrymandering sound like the tools of a statesman? Not to me. A statesman is not afraid to stand before any group of voters. If you are an elected official in America and you are afraid to stand before a certain group of voters, what does that say about what you are trying to accomplish? Who are you here for? Because maybe it is not the collective good. Likewise, to be honest, for any group of voters out there to automatically wall off the opposition party, what are you so afraid of? If listening to the opposition is so frightening to you, if you are so afraid that if your kids hear from the opposition party, then maybe you are part of the problem and are what is keeping Americans from working together. I ask each of you watching this to think big. This election, yes, is about policy, but fundamentally it is about setting a course for our future statesmen. Now, while I have talked a bit about statesmen, let me tell you the real secret of politics, and it is really no secret at all. All politics is local. Humor me while I tell you about how I got here today. What really got me interested into the study of politics was a lady in Austin, Texas who ran for city council. This lady was Bertha Sadler Means, and she ran for city council in 1981. She lost that election, but her impact on her community and her family was profound. Prior to running for office, she had made a name for herself as an extraordinary civil rights advocate. There was that one day in 1962 when she wanted to play golf, and the driving range would not let her play because of her race. The very same day, the Ice Palace skating rink turned her children away. She was mad, so very mad. That started a long period of working to see every facet of Jim Crow overturned in Austin. She even got her kids involved. One son, James Means, became the first African American to compete in collegiate sports in what was then the Southwest Conference. A daughter, Pat, became the first to integrate her school in Austin. This beautiful lady is my grandmother, Bertha Sadler Means, and James Means is my uncle, and Pat is my mother. And now Bertha has a school named after her in Austin. Perfectly appropriate considering she was a full-time educator most of her working life. For many of you, 2020 is your first foray into America's political system, but it is just one way of many you can get involved. You can be like Bertha Means and organize and protest and agitate till you get the powers that be. Organize strikes and boycotts. It's your right. Elbow grease goes a long way. Make phone calls, knock on doors, organize voter registration campaigns. Better yet, educate the people in your life about why this election matters. We should all vote, and if there are non-voters in your orbit, engage with them politely and respectfully, and talk with them about why they do not engage in the process. Ask questions. Getting someone to become a regular voter is not the time to try and persuade them to support your side. That pushiness might very well be the reason they are not already voting. If you can afford to give a few dollars to your preferred candidate or political party or interest group, that is great. But to be perfectly frank, I really wish money did not matter so much in politics. The moral of the story is participation is more than voting. The more of you that you can give, the more you must give. I have served 8 years on local boards in addition to my volunteer activities because I feel it is my duty to be involved. My personal favorite, though, are voter education activities where you ensure that voters have accurate information about how and when to register to vote, how and when to actually vote, early voting, absentee voting, mail-in voting, in-person voting. Depending on where you live, your voting precinct might shift depending on the election and the anticipated turnout. The fact that voting is not exactly a straightforward process says something telling about the state of our democracy, and that is another reason why your vote matters in 2020. There is a lot of unrest in the streets right now, and this is not new. So now I want to address the last form of political participation, and that is when people take their grievances to the streets. Why take your politics to the streets? Well, the reality is you are unlikely to see a bunch of billionaires marching in the streets anytime soon. But why not? When people take to the streets, it is because they believe they are marginalized. They advocate for an issue they believe has been ignored or neglected. Think of suffragettes who worked to bring the franchise to women 100 years ago this year. How long did that effort take? They certainly wouldn't have gotten the franchise sitting at home. People recognize that voting is political self-help, which is why some people work so hard to deny it to political others. If you can deny someone access to the political system, they have no choice but to take to the streets. That is what women did for years and years to gain the vote. Women took to the streets so they too could define America. America, unfortunately, has an anti-democratic strain deep in its core. Women, African Americans, and 18 to 21-year-olds each needed constitutional amendments to fully exercise their rights as Americans. This election is about defining America. After the 2015 shooting at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, there was a rush to remove Confederate iconography. For instance, in South Carolina, Governor Nikki Haley ordered the removal of the Confederate flag from State House grounds. This was followed by numerous similar acts of schools and local governments removing Confederate statuary from their premises. One such example was at the University of Texas at Austin, where then-President Gregory Fenvey said, "There is a duty to preserve and study history. But our duty also compels us to acknowledge that those parts of our history that run counter to the university's core values, the values of our state, and the enduring values of our nation do not belong on pedestals. We do not choose our history, but we choose what we honor and celebrate on our campus." I believe this is the importance of voting in 2020. This election, perhaps more than any other in my lifetime, is a generation-defining, country-defining, show the world what type of place America really is kind of election. Yet while I agree in principle with President Fenvey's assertion that we get to define ourselves, the real question is, why does it take tragedy to find our common humanity? The purpose of this year's election, hopefully, is to reclaim our common humanity and solidarity in our democracy before the next tragedy, before the next Charleston or Charlottesville. There is hope on the horizon. This November, Mississippians have the opportunity to select a new state flag. The old flag, with its Confederate imagery, no longer flies. Sure, it would have been nice if this had been done decades earlier, but now Mississippians have a chance to discover their common humanity under a banner that unites and does not divide. Martin Luther King said in 1963, "It may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, but it can keep him from lynching me," and I think that is pretty important also. The new flag will not make people love me who do not want to love me, but at least we have a chance for a new beginning, and I think that is pretty important also. Whichever party you support, it is clear that each party offers very different versions of how to achieve the best version of America. More important than party, partisanship, and ideology, though, is the transcendent notion that we are in this together. Our successes should be celebrated together and losses mourned collectively. The importance of this election is lifting our blinders to red and blue and recognizing our shared humanity, our desire to be the best we can be for America to be the best she can be. The late civil rights advocate and Congressman John Lewis wrote, "Ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes, and each one of us in every generation must do our part." So what are you voting for in 2020? You vote for the suffragists who worked so hard so that women could have what should have always been theirs, a seat at the political table. You vote for John Lewis and all the veterans of the civil rights movement. By honoring the past, you can fulfill their vision for America's future, one where we all participate to our fullest capacity. Thank you. Good night.
Hi, my name is Tracy Williams. I am a lifelong resident of Lafayette County in the city of Oxford. This is where I resided. I am a community advocate, and we are addressing two important issues here in Lafayette County. One is the removal of the monument, the Confederate monument that stands in front of the Lafayette County Courthouse. Secondly, voting is very imperative for people to get out and vote. And those are two of the biggest main issues that we are working on in Lafayette County. And so I am remaining hopeful, optimistic, and both jobs will be successful and it will get done.
Registering to vote and voting really, really matter. And if you care about your community, your state, our country, nothing is more important than voting.
Well, I think that's a wrap. We want to thank everyone again for coming out tonight or for joining us online. Also, we especially want to thank the staffs of the Arts Council and the Film Festival for making this event possible. We hope you'll keep track of our work moving forward in the weeks ahead. And last but not least, we want to remind you that registration is just around the corner for registering in person. October 5th is the day. If you're registering by mail, please make sure that your registration has an October 5 postmark. Thank you, good night, drive safe, and we hope to see you back soon. Bye-bye.